Any abandoned location automatically comes with a mystery. It's a place where there used to be life and people, but there isn't any longer. That leads us to question what happened that led to the place becoming abandoned, and what happened to the people who used to be there, too. Every abandoned place has a story, but some stories are stranger and more secretive than others. Here's our guide to some of the most mysterious abandoned places in the world. Every country in Europe that saw conflict during the Second World War is marked by the remains of military bunkers from that era. Some of those bunkers were widely known about, but others remained top secret and classified. Many of those bunkers belonged to Nazi forces, but Great Britain had bunkers of its own. And one of the most secret of them all was finally found in Scotland in 2018. This facility, hidden deep inside a Scottish forest, was to be one of Britain's last lines of defense. The soldiers who were stationed here were to become kamikaze warriors if the Nazi invasion was successful. They would be tasked with sabotaging any German attempt to set up bases or infrastructure on the British mainland, and they were expected to sacrifice their lives in the process. It's thought that hundreds of these tiny bunkers, each of which held 8 soldiers, were created in top-secret locations all over the country. They don't officially exist in any paperwork, and the majority of them have never been found. Thankfully, the guerrilla warfare the troops were trained for was never required. This abandoned restaurant in Belgium is a pretty spooky place to look around, but that doesn't come as a surprise. It was designed to scare its customers even back when it was opened. Officially called to Spookhuis Restaurant, the eatery was also known as the House of 1,000 Ghosts. The building was designed to resemble a haunted mansion and came with features that terrified patrons between meals, including smoke that descended from the ceiling, paintings that moved, and ghostly characters who appeared and disappeared without explanation. Even the menu was unsettling, with unusual items for sale including spicy worms and mud pie, all of which were served in skull-shaped bowls by staff dressed as vampires and other ghoulish characters. The doors opened for the first time in October 1997, just in time for Halloween, and the business continued trading for 11 years. Even after abandonment in 2008, most of the fixtures and fittings of the restaurant are still in place. Unsurprisingly, the building is rumored to be haunted. Some even say that's the real reason it closed. Many of the residents of Sacramento in California, USA, don't know that every time they leave the house and walk down the streets of the city, they're treading on the remnants of the people and places that came before them. Sacramento was first built in 1850 to capitalize on the California gold rush, and quickly grew to a population of thousands. But in the early 1860s, the whole city was almost drowned by floods. When the floods finally receded, the city's authorities decided to build a new city directly on top of the old one to make sure that the problem never happened again. That resulted in the burial of entire streets and houses, some as far as 25 feet below the level of the new roads. Access to the old city was still possible if you knew where to look, and so during the 20th century it became a hangout for gangsters and criminals. Many myths and legends have built up around these abandoned streets, which are supposedly so haunted that even the homeless won't go down there to seek shelter. Strange markings have been painted on the walls, and not every explorer who goes down there for a closer look comes back out again. Not every secret 20th century tunnel in Europe was built because of the Second World War. Some were started before the war broke out. For example, the so-called Stalin tunnels of Kiev. Work started on the tunnels in 1936 with the intention of connecting Kiev from one shoreline to the other below the ground. Khrushchev was entrusted with the development of the tunnels, in part because of his successful work on the Moscow metro. 12,000 people worked on creating the tunnels, all of whom were sworn to secrecy about the nature of their work. Had the tunnels been completed, the next stage would have been to create a railway line to run through them, but also a system by which the rails could be covered to allow cars and military vehicles to drive over them. This would have been a great innovation, but sadly the work was never completed. The onset of the war halted development, and when the Soviets tried to return to work after the war ended, they found that most of the tunnels had flooded badly. In 1950, they eventually decided the cost of completing the work was insurmountable and called the whole thing off. Ogrodzieniec Castle in Poland might be abandoned now, but it's not for want of people trying to keep it in use over the centuries. Nowadays, it's mostly ruined, but it's been rebuilt several times since the first castle on the site was built in the 14th century. A Renaissance castle was built to replace the original in the 16th century, but this was damaged by fire by Swedish troops in 1655. It was rebuilt and managed to persevere for another few decades, but it was attacked by Swedish troops again in 1702. A man named Tomasz Jaklinski bought the ruin in 1784 and partially rebuilt it, but moved out in 1810 without finishing the work. It now belongs to the Polish government. Fragments of the lily frescoes dating back to the Renaissance version of the castle are still visible on the bottom floor, but very few locals come to see it, thanks to stories of the Black Dog of Ogrodzieniec, a ghostly dog which is said to roam the castle at night, dragging a heavy chain behind it as it goes. A headless horseman is also said to haunt the ruined castle. It's a beautiful location, but there's no denying that it looks a little eerie. We all know that Frankenstein's monster is just a story invented by Mary Shelley. So why is there a real building in Muttal, Germany, known as Castle Frankenstein? The answer might be that some people believe that Shelley got her inspiration for the tale from a visit to this haunting relic. It was once the home of an eccentric alchemist named Johann Conrad Dippel, who was born in 1673 and was feared by the people who lived around the castle. They believed that he stole bodies from the graveyard and attempted to bring them back to life using potions and incantations. We don't know about the potions, but he did definitely experiment with corpses. Dippel created and patented a substance called Dippel's animal oil, which was distilled from animal parts and sold as a medicine for treating any illness. He eventually perished in 1734. His castle is now a ruin, although one of the towers contains a restaurant that capitalizes on the legends associated with the building. Every October, it hosts the Berg Frankenstein Halloween party and throws a lavish feast for revelers dressed as witches, vampires, werewolves, and, of course, undead zombies. As we said earlier, much of Europe is covered in secret Nazi bases and trenches, and they go much further north than most people usually imagine. There's even one in the Arctic, as Russian scientists discovered to their shock in 2016. It's thought that the facility, found on an island known as Alexandra Land, was built in 1942, not long after Hitler invaded Russia. It's only 600 miles from the North Pole, and so life for the soldiers stationed there would have been enormously difficult. Based on records and evidence found in the abandoned bunker, it wasn't populated for long. The troops attempted to survive by capturing and killing polar bears, but they were poisoned by bad polar bear meat in 1944, necessitating their rescue by a German U-boat. No replacements were sent to the bunker, and so it's been empty ever since. The cold has preserved many of the artifacts at the site, including a full set of documentation that confirms that the base was used as a weather station, relaying meteorological reports that allowed German commanders to organize the movement of troops elsewhere. The site of Ta Prohm, an ancient temple in Cambodia's Krong Siem Reap, has been abandoned for so long that architecture and nature have reached an impasse in the battle for control of the site. Roots and branches have penetrated so far through the stonework in some places that they've become the only thing keeping the old walls standing. King Jayavarman VII ordered the temple to be built as a Buddhist monastery in 1186, during the peak years of the Khmer Empire, and the stone face of his mother he ordered to be built into one of the walls is still clearly visible, even if it is badly weathered by the passing of the centuries. There are many ornate carvings and statues at the site, but by far the most noteworthy is the so-called dinosaur of Ta Prohm, which appears in one of the corners. It looks exactly like a dinosaur, and can't really be mistaken for anything else. But dinosaurs weren't officially discovered until 1824. How can there be a carving of a dinosaur in a 900-year-old temple in Cambodia, when none of the people who built it could possibly have seen one? When Hurricane Katrina tore across the United States of America in 2005, no city was harder hit than New Orleans. Even now, 15 years later, the repair operation is still ongoing in some places, and some of the buildings forced to close by the natural disaster have never reopened. One of those buildings is the Charity Hospital, which has become a dark, dirty, brutalist-looking structure without any staff or patients inside it to brighten it up. It doesn't appear to be totally devoid of life all the time, though. In December 2015, 10 years after it was abandoned, a nurse at the neighboring Tulane Medical Center took a picture of what appeared to be a single Christmas tree, standing alone at one of the windows of the derelict building. She took it as a Christmas miracle. Other people weren't so convinced, though. Instead of a tree, they saw a glowing humanoid figure and claimed the photo as evidence of supernatural activity inside the old hospital. Perhaps the scariest thing of all might be the fact that the power still seemed to be switched on inside the building that's been abandoned for a decade. Getting to the abandoned village of La Musara in the Catalonia region of Spain is a difficult task, and one you might wish you'd never undertaken. The mountain pass that leads to the town is considered to be one of the most dangerous roads in the world to drive along, and the town you'll eventually arrive at is an unsettling place. It's been abandoned since 1959, and nobody seems to know why. All that's still standing at the site now are 8 ruined homes and the shell of a church. Everything else has crumbled or been razed to the ground. Because of its location high in the mountains, the village often falls under the cloud of thick fog without warning, reducing visibility down to near zero even on sunny days. Every street and structure in the town is said to be haunted, with some visitors claiming to have heard horses' hooves on the roads and voices in the distance. Disappearances here are common, which adds to the myth and legend of the place. But the sad truth is that those who disappear probably get lost in the fog and fall to their doom. The Gardens of Helligan in Cornwall, England are beautiful, now even in their overgrown state. But they were a lot prettier to look at back in the 16th century, when they were well tended and properly looked after. The gardens sit on land that once belonged to the Tremaines, a family of aristocrats who owned a lot of land in the nearby town of Mevagissey. The family was long-lived, with one generation of Tremaines passing it on to the next, each of them leaving their own mark on the gardens, with increasingly elaborate flower displays and floral sculptures and statues. By the early 20th century, they'd become a truly epic spectacle, and might even have grown to even more magnificent proportions had the First World War not broken out. The family's gardeners and staff were called upon to fight for their country in the war, and the majority of them never came home again. Without anyone to tend to the gardens, they became unkempt and overgrown, and when the Tremaine family eventually came to the end of their line, the land became the property of the local authorities. By that point, they'd been abandoned for 80 years. There's now an ongoing conservation effort to restore them to the way they looked during their peak years. To the man who created it, and to the many tourists who visited it, Dreamer's Gate in Collector, Australia, is a beautiful wonderland of sculpture and art. To the local authorities in Collector, it's an eyesore that was built without permission and ought to be torn down. We'll let you look at these images and decide whose side you're on. Everything that exists at Dreamer's Gate was designed and built by Tony Fantasies, who wanted to create a lasting tribute to his father and also showcase the history of Australian land use practices at the same time. He started in 1993, and today his combined creations create one cohesive sculpture that's 90 feet long and 25 feet high. Tony used a range of materials in the creation of the monument, including chicken wire, concrete, plaster, piping, and locally sourced wood. The end effect is one that's part Gothic castle, part Lord of the Rings. The local council ordered him to stop work in 1999 and order it to be destroyed, and yet it's still standing today. He still considers his work unfinished, and due to the legal dispute, it will probably always stay that way. But it's become a part of the local landscape. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, and you will be the first to know when a new video comes out. Thank you for watching, and see you soon.